You rose from the ashes, and now they run. This isn't just a statement, it's the entire story of a transformation that broke the silence of pain and turned suffering into strength. It's the moment your light became too bright for those who tried to dim it. They watched you fall, some even celebrated it. They whispered while you were on your knees, assumed you'd stay there, convinced you were done. But now they run. Not because you chased them, but because your glow became unbearable to the ones who thrived in your darkness. This is the story of coming back, not just surviving, but returning in such a form that the same people who doubted you now can't look you in the eye. The ones who threw dirt on your name now choke on the dust of your rising. You were not supposed to win. You were not expected to return. But here you are, and that terrifies them. Before we dive deep into this story of awakening, rising, and reclaiming everything you were told you couldn't have, take a moment, a sacred moment, to commit to watching this entire video. Every minute carries something for your soul. Every word is part of a larger, energetic unfolding. And if you're feeling aligned with this moment, go to the comments and type your warmest wishes and the number 77. This isn't about superstition. It's about connecting to a current, a frequency that binds all who have fallen and dared to rise again. That number and your heartfelt wishes become part of a signal to the universe. You're ready for everything that's coming. You're ready to align, to manifest, to receive. Now we begin. The ashes weren't just symbolic. They were real, emotional wreckage, the remains of what once was, of who you used to be. Those ashes were the residue of betrayal, heartbreak, rejection, failure. Every time you trusted the wrong one, every time you were underestimated, left behind, misunderstood, it burned a little more, until everything you thought you were was gone. And for a while, it seemed like that was it. Like maybe they were right. Maybe you were too broken, too sensitive, too late, too much. But what they didn't see, what they could never see, was what was happening beneath the ash. Something was forming, in silence, in solitude, in shadows, a becoming. Something stronger, more radiant, more aligned with who you were always meant to be. It didn't look like growth from the outside. It looked like loss. It looked like chaos. But you weren't being buried. You were being planted. And once you rose, it was no longer about proving anything to them. The rise wasn't vengeance. It was freedom. You no longer needed their approval. You no longer sought validation from the same mouths that once spit doubt. You realized they were never the audience for your miracle. They were just the backdrop. Their rejection was the staging ground for your awakening. They were the catalyst, not the creators. And now that you've risen, they see it, they feel it, and they run. Because when someone you tried to destroy finds their power, it becomes dangerous, not to the world, but to every false version of the story that once painted them as broken. Your very presence challenges their narrative. Your joy is disruptive. Your peace is defiant. Your healing is loud. Your silence is louder. You don't even have to speak. Your energy speaks for you now. And the same people who once gathered to gossip now scatter in shame. They don't want to face what you've become, not because you hurt them, but because your healing exposes their intentions. Your success reveals their silence. Your joy echoes through the corridors of every room they once filled with lies about you. And that's why they run. Not out of fear of who you are, but because of how wrong they were. This isn't just about enemies, though. It's about every part of your old self you had to grieve, every habit you broke, every identity you shed. every version of you that had to die for this one to be born. You were your own battlefield. You had to fight yourself, your doubts, your traumas, your fear of being seen. You had to sit in rooms of silence and face everything you'd avoided. You had to unlearn the conditioning that taught you to shrink. You had to choose growth over comfort, again and again. And now, you shine not because you're perfect, but because you embraced your cracks. You no longer chase healing to fix what's broken. You understand now. The healing is the glow. The process was never about becoming someone else. It was about remembering who you are underneath the wounds. They run now, but that's none of your business anymore. You've outgrown the need to monitor the fallout. You've released the urge to explain yourself. You're not here to convince. You're not here to prove. You're here to live. Wildly, unapologetically, beautifully. Let them run. You're not chasing. You don't need to. You are finally walking in alignment with your own power. And that walk is magnetic. Doors are opening without you knocking. Opportunities arrive without you begging. Love finds you without you searching. Not because it's magic, but because you've become the frequency of your desires. You've become so clear in who you are that everything not meant for you naturally falls away. No need for force, no need for anger, no need for explanations. Let them think what they want. You're too busy building, too focused on growing, too rooted in purpose to be shaken by opinions. And here's the truth: the higher you rise, the more will be revealed. Some will pretend they never doubted you. Others will still try to provoke your past self, hoping you'll slip. But you're not that version anymore. Your responses have matured. Your silence is sacred. Your peace is power. Yes, you still feel. Yes, some days are heavy. But even your bad days now carry wisdom. Even your tears are anointed. You don't bounce back. You rise forward every time, wiser, clearer, bolder. You didn't just survive, you transformed. And that transformation has a ripple effect. Others who are still buried in their own ashes look to you now as a signal. You are proof that light is still possible, that healing isn't just real, it's revolutionary. That power doesn't come from perfection. It comes from honesty, from resilience, from surrender. And the ones who run, let them. Let them run from their guilt, their shame, their regret. That's their healing to do. It's not your job to carry it for them. You did the work. You chose the path. You stood when everything told you to fold. You returned when it felt easier to disappear. You spoke when it hurt to be heard. You showed up for yourself again and again. This journey, this rising, it's not about revenge. It's about restoration. It's about remembrance. It's about reclaiming everything that pain tried to erase. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself. And that self is radiant and real and unshakably rooted. So keep walking, keep shining, keep choosing peace over pettiness, purpose over performance, truth over trends. Let the world adjust to your new frequency. Let the noise fade behind you. Let your life be the loudest response. You are not the same. You'll never be the same. And that is the point. Let them run. You never needed to scream to be heard. That's what they never understood. Your silence was never submission. It was strategy. You watched, you listened, you learned. When the world was loud with noise and accusation, you mastered the art of stillness, not to avoid the fire, but to become it. While they played games with your name, you were learning to master the very energy they tried to manipulate. You didn't just rise, you studied the fall. You paid attention to the cracks in your foundation. You saw what brought you down, not with shame, but with clarity. And that clarity turned to power. Because now, not only have you returned, you've returned unshakable. They run not because you've become cruel, but because you've become clear. And clarity is frightening to people who depended on your confusion. As long as you questioned your worth, they could control the story. As long as you doubted your value, they could offer crumbs and expect loyalty. But now your standards are not just higher, they're sacred. You no longer settle. You no longer bargain with your dignity. You no longer entertain smallness in the name of peace. You've found your center, and in that center, there is no space for anything less than truth. There was a time when their approval felt like oxygen. You bent to be accepted. You minimized to be liked. You betrayed your own instincts for the sake of keeping peace that never lasted. But now, you breathe freely. You've learned that peace that costs your voice is just another form of silence. And you'll never be silent like that again. The days of shrinking to make others comfortable are over. The days of explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding, you are done. You're not asking to be seen anymore. You are the vision. What they call arrogance is just confidence they cannot manipulate. What they label too much is really their discomfort with a person who no longer needs their validation. And what they fear now is not your wrath, it's your absence. Because when you rose, you didn't just become stronger, you became unavailable. Unavailable to lies, to manipulation, to emotional baiting, to guilt-wrapped expectations. You've stopped showing up to battles that don't feed your soul. You've realized that peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of boundaries. And now that you live in truth, those who lived in the shadows of your silence are left exposed. They're scrambling, not because you're after them, but because they can no longer use the version of you they once controlled. Let them run. Their sprint is not a victory lap. It's an escape from accountability. And you're not even chasing. You're building. You're healing. You're walking in purpose. You're becoming everything they said you'd never be. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove you right. The vision you had in the dark is now becoming real in the light. And they can't stand it. Not because it's you, but because your rise reminds them of every time they chose fear over growth, comfort over evolution, illusion over truth. You see, not everyone fears your power, only those who hoped you'd never find it. The rest, the ones who love you, who see you, who honor you, they are rejoicing. They are inspired. Your rise gives them permission to rise too. Your glow is a mirror showing others what's possible. Because you didn't come back bitter, you came back better. You didn't just rise, you lifted others by your example. You made healing visible. You made transformation believable. You made power graceful. And that's why the right ones are drawn to you now. Not the ones who seek to control, but the ones who seek to grow. Not those who envy your fire, but those who carry their own. Your energy now filters rooms before you even speak. The fake can't stay. The real feels seen. That's the magic of alignment. You no longer need to sort people. Your presence does it for you. But this journey didn't come without cost. Let's not pretend it was easy. Rising from the ashes means there was fire. There was destruction. There were losses that nearly broke you. People you loved walked away. Situations you counted on collapsed. Comforts you leaned on disappeared. And through it all, you had to choose, crumble or climb. You chose the climb, and not once, again and again. Every day you rose a little more, even when it didn't show, even when no one noticed, even when you doubted it yourself. You showed up. That's the rise. That's the miracle. Not in one explosive comeback, but in every small moment. You chose not to give up. They don't know the nights you cried, the mornings you couldn't move, the prayers you whispered when hope felt distant. But you know, and the universe knows, and that's enough. You don't need applause for rising. You are the celebration. You are the firework. Now that you've become this version of yourself, freer, wiser, deeper, the question becomes, what now? Because rising isn't the end, it's the beginning of a life where you don't negotiate with fear, where your dreams no longer wait for permission, where your light is not dimmed to appease the insecure. You've earned this era, and you don't owe it to anyone but yourself. Let them talk, let them twist the story, let them sit in confusion while you walk in clarity. You don't need to defend your rise, it's divine. And the divine doesn't explain, it simply exists, loudly, boldly, unapologetically. So what now? You keep rising, you expand, you create, you love. You live in the open, with your full self intact. You write new chapters with a pen they thought you lost. You don't just survive, you soar. And every time you doubt, remember, you already did the impossible. You already came back from what should have ended you. Everything else is just a continuation of the miracle. You're not here to fit into a world that couldn't hold your truth. You're here to create a new one where healing is power, where softness is strength, where honesty is sacred, where rising doesn't require revenge, only release. And as you walk in that new world, the old one will whisper, "Let it." That's all it can do now. Whisper. Your voice has grown too strong for anything less. Let them run. Let them run while you rest, while you create, while you dance in your own becoming. Let them run from what they tried to break. Let them run from the mirror you've become. Let them run from the truth they spent so long avoiding. You don't need them to stay. You needed them to leave, so you could see what was always inside you. Now you see it. Now you live it. And there's no going back. You were never meant to stay small. That's the truth that kept whispering to you through all the noise, even when they tried to drown it out, even when life seemed to do everything it could to convince you otherwise. The truth was there, buried, muffled, trembling under the weight of all that was done to you, said to you, withheld from you. You weren't born to bow your head. You weren't built to shrink. You were not designed for mediocrity, silence, or submission. And you always knew it, deep down. That's what kept you alive. That tiny pulse of knowing. The voice you almost forgot how to hear. The one that refused to die. That voice led you through the fire, and now it speaks louder than ever. You're not who they remember. You're who you decided to become. This is the life you built from nothing. This is the throne they said you'd never sit on. This is the peace they said you'd never find. And now, standing tall in the ruins they left you in, you are no longer asking questions. You are the answer. You're not explaining how you got here, because they wouldn't understand the cost, the sacrifice, the deaths, not physical, but emotional, spiritual. Versions of you that had to be buried so the real you could finally stand. People think transformation is pretty, but no, it's brutal, it's painful, it's lonely, and yet through every scream, you were writing the origin story of a legend, a survivor, a light too bright to extinguish. They run now, not because of who you are, but because they hoped you'd never find out. They were comfortable when you doubted yourself, when you second-guessed your intuition, when you dimmed your spirit to fit into their comfort zones. But now, you no longer ask for space. You take it. You don't request respect, you embody it. Your very presence is a mirror, and not everyone can handle their reflection. You reveal what they've buried, You awaken what they've ignored. You remind them of the courage they never claimed. And so, they run. Not everyone can hold your fire. And that's not a tragedy. It's a filter. The fire within you is not meant for cages, not meant to keep anyone warm who won't respect its flame. This fire, it was born in silence, fed by sorrow, ignited by every time you were told to stay down. And now that it blazes, it makes no apologies. You've entered a season of spiritual sovereignty, one where your joy is not up for debate, your purpose not up for negotiation. Let's talk about what it really means to rise, because rising is not just about elevation, it's about release. You had to let go of things that once defined you. You had to loosen your grip on the old story, the one you were handed but never agreed to. You had to unlearn the need to explain yourself, to over-deliver, to people-please. You realized that your power is not in your performance, it's in your presence. And when you stopped begging for acceptance, you finally found peace. That's when they started to flee. Because your peace is threatening. It cannot be controlled, predicted, or coerced. It's sovereign. And people who haven't found their own sovereignty will try to diminish yours. They'll call it arrogance, coldness, selfishness. But it's none of those things. It's clarity. It's boundaries. It's self-love. The kind that doesn't require a justification. The kind that says, I will not bleed for someone else's comfort anymore. You've walked through the fire and came out not just alive, but renewed, refined, transformed. And now you don't carry the same need to be understood. You realize that not everyone has the capacity to see you clearly. And that's okay. You no longer shrink for visibility. You stand tall in truth, whether they see it or not. What's different now is your relationship with power. It's no longer external. You're not trying to get power. You've realized you are power. Not because you're loud, not because you dominate, but because you walk with integrity. Because you no longer trade your values for approval. Because you don't run from your shadow. You've made peace with it. You've integrated. And integration is the most terrifying thing to people who've built their identity around masks. You ripped off the mask, and in doing so, you became free. There's a weightlessness to you now. Even when life throws chaos your way, you no longer spiral. You observe, you choose, you respond. That calm, that poise, that's the result of every night you thought you wouldn't survive. It's the reward of every time you cried and still got up the next day. It's the fruit of every seed you planted while others were laughing. And now, they watch. They watch the very garden they mocked bloom in front of them, and they run. Because nothing is more terrifying to those who underestimated you than seeing you thrive without their approval. This isn't about revenge. That energy is beneath you now. This is about truth, restoration, self-honoring. When you were quiet, they assumed you were weak. When you were kind, they thought you were naive. When you gave chances, they called you desperate. But now they realize your patience was strength. Your silence was wisdom. Your generosity was choice, not obligation. They run now, not because of anything you did, but because of everything you've become. You've become the version of yourself that they never believed you could be. And in doing so, you exposed every lie they told about you. Your success speaks louder than their gossip. Your joy shatters the narratives they built. Your healing interrupts every script they rehearsed. You are no longer the victim. You are the narrator now, the director, the architect. And you know what else? You've stopped over-explaining. You've stopped trying to justify your choices to people who never had your best interests at heart. You've outgrown the need for their permission. And in that space, you've made room for real connection. For people who celebrate you, not tolerate you, who cheer for your rise, not plot for your fall. You've become selective, not bitter, disciplined, not cold. You've learned the difference between discernment and defensiveness. You no longer allow access based on history. You require presence, reciprocity, depth, because you finally understand that your energy is a resource, and not everyone is worthy of it. Let them run. Let them rewrite their version of the story. Let them whisper from the sidelines. Your life is too full now to worry about echoes from a past you've already outgrown. You are in your season of abundance, not just in material things, but in peace, clarity, alignment. You're manifesting relationships that nourish, not drain. You're aligning with opportunities that resonate, not just impress. You're making decisions based on purpose, not pressure. This is what rising looks like. It's not about towering over others. It's about towering over the version of yourself that once settled for less. It's about meeting your own gaze and saying, "We made it. Not perfectly, not without scars, but we made it whole." You carry the wisdom of every fall, the strength of every recovery, and the courage of every new beginning. You are living proof that ashes are not the end. They are the soil of rebirth. And those who cannot understand that will always run. Let them. You're not stopping. There's a silence that follows the storm, and you've learned to live in it. Not the kind of silence born from fear or suppression, but the kind born from mastery, from knowing, from having walked through fire without becoming ash. You don't talk like you used to, not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally understand the value of your voice. You learned that speaking is not the same as being heard, and now you only speak where your words can grow. You didn't come back to prove anything. You came back to live, fully, freely, unbound by the smallness others tried to press upon you. The version of you they thought they had memorized is gone. That chapter is closed. And now, all they can do is look back at the past while you write a future too bright for their eyes. Let them run. They're not running from vengeance or punishment. They're running from realization, from reckoning, from the awareness that they were never meant to stay in your story forever. Some people are not allies, not enemies, just unfit for where you're headed. And the tragedy isn't their exit. It's how long you held the door open, hoping they'd choose to rise with you. You offered them love when they gave you silence, loyalty when they gave you doubt, grace when they gave you judgment. You were a lighthouse for people who preferred the dark, and when they saw that you wouldn't break, not completely, they began to fear what would happen if you ever stood back up. Now, you've done more than stand. You've soared, and the air is different up here, lighter, quieter, cleaner. That's what happens when you shed the weight of unspoken grief, unreciprocated love, unseen sacrifices. That's what happens when you step into the light of your own truth and stay there. They never imagined you'd stay in the light. Maybe they thought you'd visit it briefly, wear confidence like a costume, flirt with joy, then retreat into the shadows of your former self. But you've chosen differently. You've committed to being free, and that commitment, it exposes everything in them that still hides. They run because you no longer make yourself small for their comfort. They run because the excuses they once used to justify their choices fall flat in the face of your peace. They run because you've become sovereign, and there's nothing more intimidating to someone who still seeks control than a person who needs none of it. You didn't always know how to walk in this version of yourself. It was unfamiliar at first. After so long of shrinking, standing tall felt unnatural. After so much betrayal, trusting your joy felt risky. But you did it anyway. You let joy in, not because you weren't scared, but because you were finally tired of being numb. This part of the journey, the aftermath, is where your power settles into you. It's not explosive anymore. It's not loud with declarations. It's quiet, calm, certain, like a deep river. You don't rush to be understood anymore. You don't reach out to the people who ghosted you, who ridiculed your dreams, who used your openness like a weapon. You've left the door wide open for too long, and now you lock it, not out of spite, but wisdom. You've realized that not everyone is meant to access you. You are no longer public property. You are sacred ground. Only those who come with reverence may enter. That's what Rising taught you. Not just how to escape the ashes, but how to build something new from them. Not just how to survive, but how to live with honor, how to move with intention, how to treat yourself like someone worth protecting. You have become a guardian of your own peace, a steward of your own soul. And in doing so, you've become the storm and the stillness, the roar and the rest, the fire and the phoenix. You remember the nights when you questioned everything, the days you woke up with a heavy chest, wondering how much longer you'd have to fight. Those days are part of your foundation now, not forgotten, but transformed. Every tear carved space for strength. Every crack became a window. And now, your life is flooded with light. You didn't just heal, you rebuilt. And your rebuilding didn't happen in public. It happened in the quiet hours, when no one was watching, when the phone didn't ring, when you walked away from rooms that didn't feel right, even if they were familiar, when you told yourself, this is not the end, even when everything felt final. They run now because they don't recognize you anymore. And that's the point. You are not here to be who you were. You are not here to make them comfortable. You are here to be new, evolved, whole. You are not seeking closure because you've become your own conclusion. You are the exclamation point at the end of your old story. And the ones who stayed, they're not threatened, they're inspired. Because true love doesn't cower when you rise, it celebrates. True friendship doesn't get jealous of your joy, it dances with you. Real ones don't need explanations. They see you and say, I knew you were always this powerful. But the others, they run. They twist your growth into arrogance, your discipline into distance, your clarity into cruelty. Not because it's true, but because your rise invalidates their narrative. And the only way to hold on to that story is to flee from the new one you're writing. So you let them. Because chasing after those who don't belong in your future only delays the arrival of those who do. This chapter of your life is different. It's not filled with drama, not fueled by proving anything. It's ruled by ease, alignment, expansion. You've stopped chasing. You've started attracting. Not because you're lucky, but because you're aligned. And alignment is the ultimate rebellion in a world that profits from your insecurity. You've chosen to love yourself out loud, to respect your own time, to believe in your worth without conditions. You've chosen to let the universe catch up to your vision, instead of shrinking your vision to fit into someone else's doubt. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And that's why they run. Not because you hurt them, but because they never imagined you'd heal. Let them run while you rest. Let them flee while you flourish. Let them go, and don't look back. The fire is still burning. You're just getting started. There's a different kind of silence now, It's not the silence of being ignored, dismissed, or forgotten. It's the silence of peace, the kind of silence that follows years of chaos, where you finally hear yourself clearly. It's the silence of someone who no longer reacts to every storm, because they've become the sky. You've become the space. You've stopped fighting for a seat at tables that were never meant to honor your presence. You've stopped asking questions to people who never had your answers. You've stopped explaining your journey to those who only ever saw you through the lens of their own limitations. They never really saw you, not as you are now. They saw fragments, shadows, versions of you that made them feel superior, secure, in control. But you've collected your pieces. You've gathered every shattered part, every neglected dream, every muted roar, and you've built something whole, something radiant. And now they run. They run because your wholeness makes them look fragmented. Your freedom makes them feel caged. Your rise disrupts the hierarchy they once relied on to feel big while keeping you small. You were never broken, only buried. And now that you've unearthed yourself, the imbalance has become impossible to ignore. You don't even have to say a word. Your energy speaks volumes. You don't chase. You don't cling. You don't beg. That unnerves people who depended on your neediness to feel powerful, and so they create distance. Not because you've become harmful, but because you've become untouchable. They'll say you've changed. Of course you have. You were meant to. Growth is not betrayal. Expansion is not arrogance. And love, real love, should never require you to shrink. You've stopped shrinking. And in doing so, you've become a mirror. And not everyone is ready to see their reflection, because your evolution reveals their stagnation. Your voice echoes through the spaces they still keep quiet. Your fire melts the illusions they've wrapped around themselves. You do not ask to be seen anymore. You shine, regardless. You are no longer trying to blend in. You were never made for the background. You are the foreground, the focal point, the flame. It's not ego, it's embodiment. There's a difference. Ego says, "Look at me to feel valuable." Embodiment says, "I see myself," and that's enough. You've moved from validation to sovereignty, from reaction to presence, from chaos to clarity. And that shift, it echoes. It echoes through every room you enter, every step you take, every silence you hold, instead of defending yourself to those who never really listened in the first place. They run now because the game has changed. You're not on the battlefield anymore. You left it. And while they still throw arrows made of old assumptions, outdated perceptions, and recycled projections, you've stopped catching them. You let them fall. You don't explain. You don't retaliate. You simply evolve. There is no higher power than a person who knows they are enough. A person who can sit in their truth and not flinch when others distort it. A person who walks away not to punish, but to protect their own peace. That's who you are now. Not louder, just more rooted. Not harder, just more discerning. Not colder, just more precise with your love. Because you've learned that not everyone deserves front row access to your spirit. Not everyone has the capacity to honor your depth. And giving yourself to those who haven't earned it is no longer your habit. It's your history. Your history was painful, but it was powerful. Every rejection, every silence, every betrayal, every wound, they were not your end. They were your alchemy. The pressure didn't crush you. It forged you. You are not the ashes. You are what rose from them. And those who underestimated you, they'll say you were lucky. They'll say you changed. They'll say you forgot who you were. But what they really mean is this: you became who they were hoping you'd never find. Yourself, fully, fiercely, unapologetically. They run now because they recognize that you don't need them to survive or to shine. They run because your strength makes excuses obsolete. Your peace makes their manipulation powerless. Your self-love removes their leverage. You used to twist yourself into knots just to make them feel comfortable. You don't do that anymore. You've learned that any love requiring your self-betrayal is not love, it's control. And now you are uncontrollable. You've become the kind of person who doesn't just walk into rooms, you shift them. Your presence is a vibration, a frequency, a force. You don't perform, you don't pretend. You simply show up. Fully aligned, fully awake, fully alive. That's rare, that's radiant, and that's why they run. Not because you're dangerous, but because your authenticity dismantles their denial. You bring clarity, truth, power. And power is terrifying to those who've built their lives around avoidance. But you're done avoiding, done dimming, done explaining. You've embraced the silence that follows your rise, because it's sacred. It's not loneliness anymore, it's solitude. And solitude is where the real magic happens. It's where you download visions, receive direction, cultivate peace. It's where you meet the version of yourself who isn't surviving, but thriving. And that version doesn't need to be loud, they just need to be. Because their existence is the answer, their presence is the prayer, their journey is the proof. You don't look back anymore. You don't try to rewrite history. You're too busy writing destiny. You're aligned, empowered, free, and they run because they can't follow. You didn't rise to chase, you rose to lead. You didn't rise to argue, you rose to embody. You didn't rise to impress, you rose to express. You've become the fullest expression of yourself. And in that expression, you found everything you were searching for. Not out there, but in you. So let them run. Their absence is not a loss. It's a clearing. And now there's room for everything that was meant for you all along. You no longer walk, you glide. There's something in your stride now that wasn't there before. A rhythm that doesn't match the pace of those still caught in cycles. You've stepped out of repetition, out of reaction, out of resistance. Your movement now is sacred, chosen, directed by something higher than fear, stronger than the past. You don't rush anymore. You don't force. You align. Because you've learned that speed is not the same as progress. You've learned that busyness is not the same as purpose. And in that stillness, in that deliberate pace, you found a power no chaos could ever give you. Clarity. They run because they don't recognize this new tempo, this new frequency. It's foreign to them. You used to match their pace. High drama, high demand, low reward. You used to respond to every trigger, explain every move, justify every decision. But now, you choose silence over spectacle, peace over performance. And it's driving them mad. They want to know how you went from burned out to blazing, from lost to luminous, from the one they left behind to the one they can't seem to outrun in their thoughts. But you're not interested in explaining anymore. Because what you've built is not a story to be told. It's a presence to be felt. You radiate something now. It's not arrogance. It's not ego. It's liberation. The weight you used to carry, the need to be understood, accepted, validated, is gone. You no longer beg for belonging. You no longer mold yourself into what others can manage. You've stopped being digestible, palatable, pleasant to people who feed on passivity. You are fire, not the wild, uncontrollable kind that destroys everything in its path, but the divine fire, the one that warms, that guides, that purifies, the one that burns away illusion and leaves only truth behind. And the truth is this: you were never broken, you were buried. And now that you've unearthed yourself, the world doesn't know what to do with you. They run because you no longer seek permission. They run because they no longer have access. Because access to you is no longer granted by default. It's earned through presence, through depth, through consistency. The doors that used to swing wide open at the sound of anyone's knock are now guarded by discernment. You don't just let people in, you invite them with intention, because your space is sacred now. Your energy is sacred now. Your time is sacred now. And anyone who enters must honor that, or not enter at all. That's what Rising has taught you. Boundaries are not walls. They are invitations for deeper love, truer connection, real respect. You used to mistake sacrifice for love. Used to pour yourself out, thinking that would make people stay. Used to bend, break, bleed for people who didn't even bring a bandage. But now you pour from fullness. You love without losing. You give without depleting, because you've found your source. And it's not in them. It's not in applause. It's not in attention. It's in you, in your stillness, in your knowing, in your breath. You breathe differently now, not shallow gasps between crises, but deep inhales of peace. Every breath reminds you, you survived, you rebuilt, you rose. And those who run, let them. They're not running from you. They're running from who they become in the presence of your light. From the shadows you unintentionally expose just by being whole. From the discomfort of no longer being able to manipulate, minimize, or misunderstand you, because you're no longer easy to define or dismiss. You are nuanced, complex, expansive, and some people only love things they can control. Some people only respect what they can label. Some people only support you as long as you stay beneath them. But your elevation broke their framework. You didn't just escape the ashes, you built wings from them. And now you fly on currents they can't see. You're led by vision, not vengeance. You don't seek revenge, you seek resonance. You don't prove them wrong, you prove yourself right. Every single day, you breathe freely, love deeply, move honestly. You prove your worth was never up for debate. And they feel it. Even in your absence, they feel you. You've become a reminder of what they could have had, of what they walked away from, of what they mishandled. But you don't stay in those stories. You bless them and release them, because you're no longer bound by the weight of what was. You're creating what will be. And it's stunning. This life you're building, rooted in truth, grown in grace, fed by integrity. It's not loud, not flashy, but it's real. And real is rare. Real is powerful. Real doesn't run, it remains. You remain. You remain when the crowd leaves. You remain when the applause fades. You remain when the ones who said forever forget. Because you are not temporary, you are timeless. And that's what they could never comprehend. They thought you needed them to last. But you were eternal long before they arrived. And now, in their absence, you don't collapse. You expand. You fill the space they left with self-respect, with vision, with people who see you, not just what they can take from you. You no longer settle for fragments. You've become whole. And wholeness has no appetite for half-hearted love. So when they run, you don't chase. You don't ask why. You don't question your worth. Because you know now. People leave when they no longer benefit from your silence. When they can no longer drink from a well they never helped you dig. When they finally realize you were never weak, just weary. And now that you've rested, you're unstoppable. You rise every morning with a quiet fire in your soul, not to prove anything, not to earn anything, but because you are something, something sacred, something royal, something that does not beg, does not bend, does not break. They don't understand how someone can shine after being shattered. But you do. You've lived it. You've been the dust. Now, you're the diamond. You've been the silence. Now, you're the song. You've been the forgotten. Now, you're unforgettable. So let them run. Let them retreat into stories where they were the hero, and you were the one who couldn't hold on. Let them rewrite history to soothe their ego. It doesn't matter anymore, because the truth lives in your glow, and your glow cannot be denied. You don't need to correct them. You don't need to convince them. Your existence is the only evidence you'll ever need. So walk forward, with grace in your heart and fire in your soul. Because this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your reign.